Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of Project Fairlady. Now, those of you that watched the last video would be aware that I've just finished building a flat under tray for the Fairlady. So what I'm endeavouring to do now is build off that and do all of the air ducting in the front of the vehicle, as you can see there with all the cardboard, and create something that is not only extremely functional, but kind of looks pretty nice. Regular viewers of the channel would already kind of know my style, and that is to build everything out of cardboard first and then reproduce it out of aluminium in situations like this. So this is where I'm at with it, folks. I've been slowly building all the cardboard structure. I've actually got a lot of hours in it at this stage to get all the cardboard templates to a position where I'm pretty happy with them. It's not 100% correct yet. There are still some small changes that need to be made. I have actually revised the whole thing probably 3 times now, just because I got to a certain point and then it sort of evolved into something I wasn't 100% happy with. And it's very hard to plan out something like this. If you've watched my videos for a while, you'll remember I did a similar thing on my V36 Skyline 370 GT twin turbo that I built. I made ducting for all the intercoolers and oil coolers and all that sort of stuff, and air intakes, etc. And even though there was a lot to it, it was still much simpler than this setup in here, because the shapes that I'm dealing with in the front of the Z32 are much more complex than the layout that was in the front of the V36. So let's move in a bit closer and take a bit of a look at it. Alrighty, so you can see from here, this is our driver's side intercooler. What I'm sort of trying to achieve here, we have our flat floor pan that we built previously, and what I'm trying to do is to create a situation where any air that enters the bumper, this guy down here, gets trapped in various pockets that feed into the cores of all of these coolers. So you can see on the front bar there, I have those ducts in there which lead into this arrangement here, the old fog light area. So we're trying to close that off so that air enters this intercooler on the side here. Same with down the bottom. It comes through the bottom there, hits this and can't escape. The only way through is through this core, you know. It's quite sort of complicated to be able to get it to seal up properly and also kind of work in the position that it's in. These aftermarket intercoolers aren't really ideal in their fit up and all that sort of thing. I have actually had to put quite a bit of work in making sure the intercooler positions are correct. I've replaced a lot of the brackets, taken stuff off and straightened it out. You know, the ravages of time and, you know, all the idiots that have worked on this car over its life, you know, it sort of plays havoc with the positions of things. When you add aftermarket components into the mix, you end up with a little bit of a situation where you're not 100% sure where something's meant to be from the factory. So that in itself can create an issue and cost you a lot of time. So I'll run through it all with you folks. So that's, you know, one of the side mounts and how the air's being sort of ducted into there. This big bulky section that you see in the middle is just like, oh, what do you got there? You're covering heaps of stuff up. But the only things that I'm covering up with that is the chassis, and you know, there's piping and there's the dryer for the AC behind there, which is all stuff that's going to create turbulence when the air hits it. And the radiator and the AC core and all that sort of stuff doesn't actually protrude any further that way or this way than where I have these kind of block-offs mounted. So even though it looks like there's a lot of area that I've taken up with stuff, there really isn't, you know, like it's not interfering with anything. And this side over here in particular, the area behind here is just all intercooler piping. There's no cooler stuff behind there. So we're not actually, again, putting stuff in the way that's going to create a problem. All we're doing is diverting air that hits it back across the front and into the actual coolers, you know. Because these areas do create a huge amount of turbulence if they're left open, and the air coming in the front is just hitting the intercooler piping and all the rest of the stuff. It just goes berserk, which, as you'd imagine, air that's that's spinning around and going friggin' batshit crazy, it's pretty hard to get it through stuff. It just doesn't want to go through things. So the smoother and more streamlined the airflow is, the easier it will go through stuff. You can see this stuff's all sort of capped off at the top and sort of all that sort of business. It's interesting to have a look at it with the front bar on, folks, which you will see. But the front bar is probably not going to go back on until some of this is reproduced in aluminium. There are bits and pieces that I've done, modifications I've made. There's a bit of a modification I've made to these brackets. Down on this side, I've riveted some other pieces of aluminium to them, so these can be bolted through. So a lot of this will be able to come apart as components and sections. Some pieces will be riveted and other pieces will be riv-nutted, so that, you know, it'll just kind of be quite easy to get pieces of it out and in, and, you know, it sort of won't be a problem in that way, then rather than trying to make it something that you can't kind of get out, that's too attached to things. Like all this bottom section and all this, it'll either have brackets on the bottom that's either riveted to these things and then just riv nuts up through from underneath and all that sort of stuff, just to make it simple to get it all in and out, you know. So that's where I am with it, folks. I know it probably doesn't look like much, but believe me, there is a absolute crap load of work in it to get it to that point, you know. So I'll carry on. I'm almost at the point of starting to do bits and pieces out of aluminium. What I'll probably do is try and work in sections and do pieces at a time, because the templates that I've made here have been built on top of each other so much. Like, it's almost like bloody paper mache at this stage. I've made so many changes to the templates as I've been doing them. Even though the shape's right, the thicknesses are all over the place, and it's a little bit hard to get accurate reproductions when you have bends with varying thicknesses and stuff. What I should probably do is make all new templates in one piece, but honestly, folks, I'm too lazy to do that. So what I will attempt to do is try to make them from these templates in aluminium without screwing anything up, just to try and save myself a little bit of time. But, you know, we'll see what happens. It might bite me in the bum. I might have to make a couple of pieces twice, but either way, that'll probably still save me time rather than making a whole new set of templates. So I will just carry on doing a little bit more fine tuning to all this cardboard work, and then I will attempt to sort of do a bit of work in aluminium. So I'll get back to you, folks, when I get a little bit done, and we'll see how it's starting to shape up. See you soon. Alright guys, I'm back. So let's take a bit of a look at what I've made off those templates. So these are the various pieces that make up the ductwork on the driver's side. I'll give you a bit of a look at how they've gone from the templates to the actual pieces, and various modifications that have been made along the way. So this first piece here, you can see the resemblance between the two. That folds in roughly the same place. Not much to say with that. That's where we had our bend there, where it wraps around the intercooler. You can see bits and pieces that have been done to it. You know, we've got a tab on the back here with a riv nut. You can see that there are various riv nuts on it in different places. A couple of little bends. But basically that's remained unchanged from the template. So yeah, it sort of looks pretty good. You've got to sort of keep in mind when you're doing your templates and transferring them onto aluminium, varying thicknesses can make a difference of how well they transfer. And often you'll only cut out part of it and leave other sections uncut so you can test fit it before you do final length cuts and things. Like you can see here that the length is slightly different on those. You know, this has probably been compressing more, or you know, maybe this is too long, who knows. We'll see when we fit other stuff up. This one here, you can see there are a few minor modifications that have been made to it. Again, a bit of a tab on the back. Now the reason these tabs are on the back is just so that you don't see them when it's all sort of together. You sort of bolt up from underneath and then rivet through. Otherwise that would be reversed and be in the sort of duct area instead of behind the panel. Again, just a bend, you know, that riv nut and that. Nothing huge about that one. This guy here, same thing, just basically a cleanup of the original template. You can see that how well that kind of sits over the top. Couple of things I've done, I've trimmed down that tab that I left on there, and I've made a little bit of a notch here because that actually goes over. Where is it? That actually goes over this piece here, and that's so that the again the bracket is on the back side. So when you're looking at it from in the duct area, it looks like that, just with a bolt going through it. You know, it looks a lot neater than having the bracket on this side, having it on the back edge there. And finally, this one here, it mounts on the side of the intercooler, and you can see again it's fairly close to our original. There are a few things that I've done to this. I've just cleaned it up a bit, you know, made a bit of a fancy shape in the side there, just to try and remove a bit of material. But basically you can see it's basically the same thing. This cutout here, that's for your indicator light on that side. So that, once the indicator light goes on in this area here, it sort of seals that up. So I think we better go over to the front of the Fairlady, start fitting all this up, and I'll fill you in on a bit of the technique involved in sort of working through this process and getting everything to sort of fit up good and also look really nice. All right, let's get to the Fairlady. So just a couple of things to show you folks before we sort of get too far into the assembly. This is one thing that I had to do initially, was make up these brackets in here. So there's 1, 2, 3, and they're riveted onto this main intercooler support bracket, and they have a riv nut in each of them. And all the riv nuts that I'm using in all this stuff, folks, they're 5mm stainless riv nuts, whereas all of this bigger stuff here, they're all 6mm. And the reason I've gone down to a smaller riv nut is, firstly, they don't need these bigger nuts and bolts set up in them. It doesn't really need a whole heap. And plus I can tell fairly easily what's what, whether it's a bolt, like a cup head bolt that's actually holding stuff together, or whether it's you know, a bigger bolt that's actually doing more of a structural job. It just kind of makes it a little bit easier all round, but it's obviously the right way to sort of do it. So we've got that, and there are sort of various bits and pieces that I've sort of done. Like I mentioned earlier, I've done a lot of tuning up with these intercoolers to get them sitting where I think they sort of need to be. This intercooler here, you can see that there's a bit of a mark on it down there. I think I'm actually going to have to cut that off and weld a flat plate on there, because it seems to be interfering with the front bar in this area. It just seems to be too close. No matter what I do, I can't sort of get that right, so I'm just going to cut it off and put a flat section on there. It won't affect the intercooler in any way. And you can see, well, you probably can't see, but there's big rub marks on the corner of it where it looks like it's always been rubbing on that corner, which, you know, it's just not a good thing. One on the other side's the same. It's not quite as bad, but I'll probably just do the same thing to both intercoolers. Alright, let's set up and start getting our first piece on. So this guy here, folks, that's our first piece. And the way this goes, I've got a slot so it can sort of go into here, like so. And it just sits in there like that. And I'll now bolt it through into those 3 riv nuts that are in those 3 little brackets that I riveted on there. Like anything, folks, the hardest thing about doing stuff like this is nutting it all out. Like, it just takes so long to work out how you're going to approach something, because like anything, there's lots of different ways you can do stuff. And I guess CAD has probably, like real CAD has probably sorted out a few of the issues with not being able to see problems before they arise, and not sort of being able to look further into the project. But you know, as a person that, you know, has never gotten into CAD or anything like that, I've just kind of got to suck it and see. So yeah, it can be quite perplexing at times, just even initially, just trying to work out how you're going to approach something, because there's lots and lots of pitfalls with things. And even with experienced folks, you still make mistakes, you still kind of go down the wrong path occasionally with stuff. So that's that piece on, nice and snug. Now there's another riv nut that actually goes up through the bottom here, another bolt that goes into that riv nut there, but we'll leave that loose for the time being while I fit the next piece. And it's going to be done from this side. And you can see here, folks, that this area here, this is what I'm going to be covering up. And you can see that there's no benefit to having this area here exposed. All it does is when the air rushes in from the front, it just hits all this piping and all this crap. And just, yeah, it goes crazy. It doesn't want to push it through the core, it just wants to create turbulence, which is detrimental to the airflow through the cores. So what I've done here, and you would have seen it in the cardboard, is I've got a piece of plate that then goes across here and then directs air back into, you know, all of your cooler cores. So with anything like this, you're not actually reducing the airflow into the coolers, because the amount of airflow that gets through into the front of the car is regulated by the size of the openings in your front bar. If you're not changing the opening in the front bar, you're still getting the same amount of volume going in. You're just sort of pushing it around where you want it. So if you have deflectors, which is basically what this is, then they're not reducing your airflow, they're just redirecting it. So don't think that anything that's in here that looks like it's blocking something is actually blocking, it's just redirecting. Okay, and this is our next piece here, folks. So as I said, the reason I haven't got that bolted down is I need to push this down to get this in, because it's folded here at the top, so it seals up underneath the front crash bar there. So we'll get some bolts in that. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Alright, let's get some up underneath and close this up. Alright, so that's getting nice and solid now, folks. You can see it's all firmly attached at the bottom. Now what I also have is I've got a fixing through the top here into this section. So there's a bolt here with a washer that you can see that goes up through there. Just move that around a little bit. Alright, so you can see, folks, that is very, very solid there. And as I mentioned, we've completely blocked that area that was going to create all the turbulence, and we've created a deflector which is now funneling the air straight into the radiator and the oil coolers. So it's going to hit this from the front, it's going to come through the front bar, hit that, head that way, in we go. None of this hitting stuff and getting smashed. Straight into the front, and then the same deal on this side here. So the sort of point on this V here, that's actually in line with the divider in the front bar that separates the gills from the intercooler section to the main section. And so that's completely hidden behind there, but as the air goes into each one, it can divert that way, but it doesn't completely seal up. It is pulled back, you know, that far from the front sort of thing. So air can still sort of move across, but it generally, anything that's on that side of the bar where the gills are will go into here, and anything on that side will generally be going into there. So you can see up the top here what we've done as well. We're now smoothing this transition out here where the fog light normally goes, where I've cut the back of it because we have the ducting in the bar. So this is all starting to create like basically a bucket, so that once the air gets shoved in there, it's trapped, and the only way out is through the core. Same deal with all this stuff. So let's put our next piece in and have a look at how this is progressing. So this next piece, folks, it bolts up through into this bracket that's in there, like I showed you when we were looking at the pieces, and that bracket is concealed down in here, like so. Obviously not necessary to try and conceal all the brackets, folks, but you know, it just looks a lot nicer. Yeah, it's a little bit more work and a bit more of a pain in the ass to set up, but you know, we've got to make it look good, folks. We've got to make it look good. There's also another bolt that goes up here. So again, I've bolted through into this support at the top there. See if you can see that. Yep, so I'm going to put a bolt up through here. Same deal. That fixes that up. Alright, now, our last piece for this corner, this guy here. So this was a little bit of a tricky piece, folks, because of these big cast-in bloody nobules that are on there. It was kind of hard to work out how to do this, so this is what I've done. That's where my piece sits like that, and it's like, well, how am I going to friggin' secure this? So, mini lathe to the rescue. So what I did, folks, is I made these guys. As you can see, they're hollow on the inside, and they're sort of like a cap, and they're actually tapered, which is a process that I did after I got it off the lathe, and that's because of the angle of the end tank here. So what that does is that goes over the piece like so and secures it with a bolt through the middle. So let's get these guys on. And one last one, straight up there. Alright, so you can see now, folks, that is looking fairly flash. Fairly flash. Cardboard's still on that side. There's obviously still a bit of work I've got to do on the bottom of this. I've got to sort of create a ramp for the air to come up on to force it more up so it doesn't hit that that flat section behind there. But basically that's this side here pretty much done. There's still a piece I need to put in here, but I really need the front bar on to properly get this located before I work that out. It will probably just be a piece of angle that can just kind of slide up and down as this moves, you know. So it's not really a big deal. And as I say, your indicator seals in this area here, so it's sort of completely sealed off. So as I said, folks, you can see we've created this bucket where the air gets driven into by the openings in the front bar, and it has no way out other than through the cooler. And obviously that's how you're going to get the most out of your cooler. Coolers on the old girl here, not real big, bigger than the factory coolers of course, but you know, still not really massive. So we've got to get the most use out of them that we can. I'm even toying with the idea now of mounting some water spray jets up here. Because I now have an area that I can do something like that, it's quite easy to mount a spray system in here. So yeah, just another thing I may consider for the future. I'll see really, I'll see what intake temps are like and see whether it's really any benefit to have an intercooler spray set up in there once the car's on the road and I can do some real world testing with it. Obviously there's probably going to be some little modifications that need to be done to this once the bar's on. Nothing ever really transfers 100% perfect from the templates. Really you just want to get it as close as you can, make minor adjustments as you go with it, and then when the final fit up happens, which for this is the front bar, I'll then possibly have to trim a few bits and pieces, because often if there's an area that's a bit tight, the cardboard will just compress and you don't even really notice that the cardboard's kind of compressing. But of course the aluminium sheet, no compressy. So I think we might leave this video here, folks. We're probably nearly pushing half an hour as it is. So next week I will finish all this off and we will get to see the whole thing completed. But I'm pretty happy with it so far. I think it's coming along quite well. It's kind of unique. It's not something that I've seen done before with a Z32, although that's not to say that anyone hasn't done it. But yeah, this is just my take on how to do this kind of crap. So as always, folks, thanks for stopping by the Aussie Shed. Bloody pleasure to have you here. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel. If you've got any questions about any of this stuff, leave a comment, or just leave a comment to say g'day. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.